Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight we have a late night insight video on a Rogue Perfumery fragrance from 2022, from just a couple years ago. And this is called LOM M LaCroix. Now, I must admit that I thought the name was a little bit strange at first until I heard the backstory. And the backstory basically goes like this. So Manuel Cross's ancestors were basically forced to flee France, and they became their own version of rogues by going to Ireland and becoming smugglers in one form or fashion. And so the name over the years, sort of the lineage of the name changed, which it happens to do when people go from one country to another. And so LaCroix became closer to LaCroix, which became closer to Manny Cross or Manuel Cross, which is the brand owner's name and perfumer, who I'm a big fan of. I still am yet to review things like Derviche, which I absolutely will, the original Derviche, and one of my favorite creations from him, Chypre Mousse, Chypre Siam. Sorry, it's 11:30 at night, and I am going to bed right after this video, I promise. And then, of course, we have Tabac Vert, which is still on the to review list. But I have reviewed a couple of these rogues off of samples, and this is how this one's going to go. So this is truly going to be kind of a late night insight video for me. Just a quick hit video on a fragrance I'd probably never be able to talk about if not for the kindness and generosity of the community. So you can see I've given this a couple wears. And I'll tell you right now that if you said, Ramsey, you could have one Rogue fragrance in your arsenal that you don't currently own, this would be it, because this is my kind of fragrance through and through. Now, the other thing that this does that I found very interesting is this is a 100% natural fragrance, which 100% natural perfumery is not easy to do. It's actually one of the hardest things in perfumery. Synthetics kind of hold everything together. The example I've heard some people give is, imagine like a shirt that has 99% cotton and 1% spandex, or 1% some sort of synthetic material that makes the shirt just look a little better than if it was just pure cotton. And so this pure perfumery can't have that. 100% natural perfumery can't use some of the things that synthetics do to give the fragrance joints and kind of move around. And so he made a fragrance called Flora and Fauna, which I reviewed on the channel off of a decant, thanks to another generous subscriber. And I really, really like that one. Flora and Fauna was also a Chypre, but it was much closer in style and structure to something like Mitsuko, whereas this is much closer to something like Diaghilev, for example. So I like them both, but this one's probably more my style because the dirtiness, the leatheriness, a little bit of the animalic aspects are amped up in LOM. Okay, so it just fits my personality better. That's just what I would say. So it sort of opens up, surprisingly, it opens up with this strange sort of candied type lemon accord, which I don't like. It's actually lemon and bergamot. It's probably my least favorite part of the fragrance. If I could isolate one part of the fragrance that wrong-footed me just a little bit, it would be the opening, because the opening has this weird, this is about an hour and a half old spray, but I don't know if I want to waste another spray because I probably won't get any more of this juice. But when you first spray, you're kind of hit with this strange, almost like candied lemon that recreates the smell of this strange, like sort of lemon drop candy thing, which I did not like. But very quickly that begins to dissipate, I would say 2-3 minutes in, and it starts to reveal the true nature of the fragrance, which is this very intensely smoky leather type fragrance that if I was blindfolded, I would probably say uses castoreum and birch tar and all this other stuff, which is impossible because this is a 100% natural perfume. As I said, 100% botanical, 100% vegan, and no animal-based materials were used. So you can't have castoreum or anything like that. It smells like it. So here's the image that kind of comes to mind. So imagine that you have this barrel, and inside of this barrel you have this leather jacket, and inside of the barrel with the leather jacket you put some sort of a match or something that is just infinitely, releasing smoke into this barrel. And the barrel is then put on the ship to be smuggled using Manuel Cross's sort of own story to be smuggled across the ocean Um, and they're trying to smuggle your leather jacket in this barrel across the ocean, filled up with smoke, and all of a sudden they get busted. And when customs goes to open up the barrel, that smell of like trapped smoke is just being sort of it's been in the barrel for so long that it's almost like papered over, because the thing about birch tar to me is that sometimes it can smell very papery, smoky, but it has this weird sort of paperiness to it. Think of the actual birch tar being peeled off the tree in like papery strips. And there's this thin layer of smoke that covers over all of the imperfections in the leather in the way that I kind of perceive this fragrance. Now, in my story, I would say that when they pull the barrel off the ship for inspection, they throw it onto land before they actually sort of pop the barrel and the smoke comes out and all that stuff happens, right? And by throwing it onto land, you're also adding a very important element into this fragrance, and that is a beautiful feeling of this Irish like valley. Okay. So I think he specifically mentions that two of his ancestors were driven from France and fled to Ireland in 1735. Generations of the Cross family quietly recounted stories about those rogues who engaged in nefarious smuggling activities when they thought we kids weren't listening. LOM M LaCroix is dedicated to Alan and Cornelius LaCroix, which just sounds like a smuggler's name, Cornelius, and Alan's probably a fake name. In keeping with the times they lived in, I decided to work only with natural ingredients to create my first leather fragrance. Okay, so that's his little blurb there. But it's interesting that whole feeling of like greenery and being in this lush green Irish valley starts to kind of kick in, where you get like fresh greens and fresh flowers and stuff like that with the leather, of course, the leather and the flowers, and I think the first, let's say, couple minutes are my least favorite part of the fragrance, like I said, which is interesting because many folks find openings in fragrances, many fragrances nowadays, to be their favorite, and then they kind of hate the dry down later on because the dry downs become very bland and monotone and all that stuff. They fall apart in the base, as is sort of the saying that everyone just uses nowadays. Here, I think in Loam, once you kind of hit about 15 to 30 minutes in, the fragrance really starts to come into its own and really, I think, represent the genre brilliantly. This is a bad boy fragrance, okay? This is like Manuel Cross calls it a bad boy leather fragrance. Now, along with the greenery and the florals, I think what starts to give this bad boy in a leather jacket sort of rolling in the Irish Valley feeling is the orris butter, or the orris, the iris in general. The iris adds a little bit of powderiness to it. And also, apparently, he's used Cassis Absolute, which adds this very spicy, intensely green floral aspect that kind of starts to peek through. And then also, as a side note, working with Cassis is not easy. It's actually one of the more difficult notes to work with, on top of the fact that it's 100% natural, like I mentioned, which is even more difficult. So this is a pretty impressive creation for a natural fragrance. Surprisingly, there's also a touch of rose in here. It's funny because I reviewed Fate Man today, and in my Fate Man review, I said that the rose that was used in Fate Man was like this austere and almost like a touch out of place, like a Picasso painting. It still works, but it's like strange to see the mouth over there and the eyes over there and all that stuff, right? The same can be said of Loam. The rose here adds a little bit of class to an otherwise kind of strange scene, leather jacket in a smoky barrel rolling around in the Irish countryside. It's a little bit weird. At first, when the smoke and the dark brooding, so I would say the leather sort of comes to you in this dark brooding, almost like misty ship kind of breaking through. It's a dark brooding type scene. And then if you can just imagine like this 1950s kind of slicked back hair with the little, curl coming down here, this greaser style hair, if you will. While riding in like a Chevy Bel Air with a toothpick in his mouth. Like that's the image that sort of comes to mind with this leather jacket. But it really turns, because of the florals, because of the iris and a touch of that powderiness that comes through. It sort of starts to turn a little bit more chic when the iris hits. And you all know iris and leather is one of my favorite combinations of all time. Just out and out one of my all-time favorites. Now, you also know that Chypres are one of my all-time favorite genres, okay? And then if you go even further, leather Chypres are my favorite, are really like my favorite genre within the Chypre category, because you could have all sorts of Chypres, floral Chypres and animalic Chypres, all this other stuff. So this is a proper leather Chypre. It has all of the ingredients to make it a proper leather Chypre. Now, I have said this before and in many reviews, but leather Chypres, and this fragrance is the exact same thing. It has this underlying ability just to kind of speak to me, you know? I don't have to work at it. I spray it and it just does its magic. And I can almost picture myself wearing that leather jacket that I described, standing in someone else's win in the 1950s or maybe 1735, like Manuel Cross mentions. It's just so transportative, and that's really what I like about LOM. It takes me to a place, there's a connection there. I could easily see myself wearing this. It fits my personality. My only beef with the fragrance is I really think Manuel Cross sort of handcuffed himself a little bit by not using something like real castoreum or even synthetic castoreum or whatever to give that animalic funk, to push it over the edge into something that I would have been screaming from the rooftops about trying to try. Now, I still am very impressed by this. I think if you like fragrances like some of the leather Chypres I mentioned, you know, you like something like Bandit or Aramis from 1964 or something like that, the original Aramis, these old school leather Chypres, these classical leather Chypres, give this one a shot. Give LOM M LaCroix a shot. You know, it's definitely worth a sniff. So here, I'll read you the little blurb. This is from Manuel Cross, the owner. So he says, the strong blast of lemon and citrus at the opening is contrasted with cassie flower, which has an intense green, spicy aroma. Along with birch tar, these two ingredients are the backbone of my leather accord. Cedar is used to suggest the wood planks of the boat they used to escape France, and as LOM M LaCroix develops to the darker it becomes, smoky labdanum adds a somewhat menacing effort, and oak moss adds facets of wood, ink, tar, and seaweed. So he's known for using his oak moss. One of the reasons why Chypre Siam got so much critical acclaim was because of the real oak moss absolute used, and you can see the color of the juice. You know, that's what real oak moss absolute does. Although I only use botanical ingredients, it's a powerhouse with excellent longevity and sillage. LOM M LaCroix is a bad boy leather that brings out your own inner rogue. Hell of a blurb. He's a better blurb writer than a lot of these big name brands, I'll tell you that right now. And you can see the Chypre makeup there. The labdanum is very important. The oak moss is very important. The bergamot in the top is very important in a proper Chypre. And he created a hell of a proper leather Chypre. So very, very impressive stuff. I would love to have a bottle of this one day, although probably never happen. I'll wear my other leather Chypres in honor of this. But yeah, that's kind of my just quick hit video late at night. Again, something I'd never be able to do. Put it on the to sniff list if you're into the kind of leather fragrances that I'm into. So again, thank you to my perfume god person for sending this my way. If you have experience with it, as always, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Appreciate everyone watching. Cheers, guys. Have a good night. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.